Hello everyone, I hope all of you are doing well. So in this episode we are going to start building our registration system, and it is going to be a lot of fun because we are going to configure everything that is related to register our users successfully into our website. So it is going to be a lot of dealing with our database and also with our HTML templates. So let's get started. Now I just realized that I did not specify a lot of times throughout this tutorial that our code is available from the GitHub, and you can definitely go down below to the description and bring the link for the repository that includes the code of that tutorial, and you can download it in the way that you like to. So you can also use the command of git clone, or you can download it as a zip file, up to you. But basically it is a great idea to go to that link and follow the code that I'm writing throughout this tutorial. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. So I will basically have to deal with a way how I can accept users to our website. And the way that we are going to do that is obviously by storing some information regarding our users in a database. So it totally makes sense to go ahead and create a new module, and then we will store some special fields like username, password and stuff like that is going to be our columns within that module. So let's go ahead and do that. So I will go up top here. Basically, I'd like to remain the item as our second module, and I will write in top here class user, and it will inherit from db.module like we did in our previous modules. And our first column would be the ID again. So as you remember, I said previously that it is a convention and it is a must thing to have that ID field, because this is how the Flask wants to identify each of your objects by their ID numbers. So I will allow myself to copy this line from here and paste this in as a first line over there. And now I can allow myself to continue and creating some new fields. So I will go ahead and create username equals to db.column, and I will make that to be equal to db.string, and I will close this out. And it is a great idea to limit our users by saying length equals to 30, so it will be maximum 30 characters per each username. And this is something that we want to keep unique because we probably don't want to let our website users to have multiple usernames that they are the same. So unique could be true. And we will also specify nullable equals false, and just to follow this exact same order like we did previously, I will go here and type in nullable equals false. And I realized that I missed the comma here, so let's complete that up. Okay, so this is our username field, and as you know, in most of the websites we also have to provide our email address when we register to a different site. So it is also a great idea to have an email field. So it will be email address equals to db.column, and this time I want to limit this email address as well, but I have to raise our limit a bit. So if there is a username with a length of 30 characters, then it might be a greater idea to give our email address a limit of 50 characters. So there is a lot of space for @email.com, something like that. So I will also make that nullable equals to false, and also unique equals true. That is quite making sense. And our next field here would be our password. Now I'm going to name this field a little bit different because we are not going to store passwords as plain text inside our database. Now doing something like this could lead to a lot of security risks, and that is something that is basically could make hackers' life easier to pull some information from your website's database. So you probably want to avoid this by storing the password not as plain text, but besides you want to apply some hashing algorithm or some another way that will encrypt that password. So even if there is a hacker that is going to steal some password information from your website, he doesn't have a lot of things to do with that because it is encrypted. So I will name this field by saying password underscore hash, and that will be equal to db.column, and we are going to receive here string again. Now I'm going to give this length 60 because the mostly used hashing algorithm that Flask allows us to use will always convert the passwords to being 60 characters. So this is why I'm going to specify here length equals to 60. And I will continue on by saying nullable equals to false, and I actually don't have to write here unique equals true because it is totally fine if two people have the exact same password in our website. Now this is the password field. We still have some more fields to set up for our users, and the next one will be the budget. Now if you remember from the very beginning of this tutorial, I said that we are going to apply a budget system for our users. So it totally makes sense to describe our users' attributes by one more attribute that its name will be budget. So I will go ahead and say budget equals to db.column, and that time this will be equal to db.integer, and we will go here and continue by saying nullable equals false, and we are also going to set a default value when this user object is created. Now you probably want to give some amount of money for your new users to start buying and selling stuff from the market, so we will set the default value for that, for example to 1000, so the users can at least have 1000 coins at the very first registration attempt. Okay, so it totally makes sense to set up a value like that. And one final field that I like to add here before we close up this module will be a field that is going to be related to our items module. Now what that means, it means that we want to allow our users to own several items, because this is what this website is going to be about. So in database definitions, this is something that is called relationship between two tables. Now in our case we use modules because we work with Python, but we have to use some special field that is called relationship, and inside that relationship field we are going to describe several arguments to make the model to understand that the user can own some items. Okay, so let's go to here and write in items equals to, so we will type in db.relationship like that, and we will close our parentheses, and the relationship is going to be with our item model, so we will say that by writing the model name inside a string like this. Now continuing from here, I am also going to type in backref equals to, and we will open a single quote, and inside here we will say owned user. And what backref does, it is basically a back reference to that user model. So for example, if we have one user and then we want to know the items that this user owns, we are basically going to grab the object of the user and we will access the attribute of items. But let's consider a situation that you have an iPhone item inside your database and you want to know its owner. Now you are going to grab the item object and then you will access it by the attribute of owned user, and that is because you specify the back reference of that item. So it is quite important to provide this back reference because it will allow us to see the owner of specific items. So the last argument that I will say here will be lazy equals true, and that is something that we also have to set up here, because if you don't set up the lazy equals true, then the SQL Alchemy will not grab all the objects of items in one shot. So it is quite important to specify the lazy equals true in that case. Now I want you to take a look how this DB is not actually a column, besides it is a relationship. So what that means, it means that this is not actually going to be stored as a column when we try to inspect inside our database. So it is quite wrong, because we also want to store information about certain users that are owning some items. Now the way that we are going to do that is by saying to our items module which user is owning it. So we will go back to our items module and specify one more column that we must create in order to make this relationship to work successfully. So we will go here and we will type in owner equals to db.column, and this will be an integer. And the next thing that we want to write here is the relationship to the user model. So I will say db.foreign key, like this. Now what foreign key does, it searches for the primary key of your module from the module that is related to. Now if you remember, I said previously that there is a great reason that we have to create this ID in here in order to the SQL Alchemy to understand each row that is going to be stored inside our databases. So now if we go ahead and create foreign key, we can basically say that this foreign key is going to be related to the other module's primary key. So we will say in here user.id, and this is related to the each unique row that is going to be stored in that ID. So it is quite important to write here user.id in lowercase. Okay, so now I'm back at my terminal and I like to create all the tables from scratch inside our database. So we will go with Python and we will use here from market.modules import db, and then we can basically say db.drop all. Now this will delete entire information from your database including all the tables, so we will say that, and then we will recreate everything. Now I'm doing this just because we want to clean our information before we test new things out, but in production when you add a new table you don't always have to delete the entire information. Basically you could also execute create underscore all, but I just wanted to show you that there is the option of drop underscore all as well. So now if I go ahead and create everything, then if I don't receive errors, then it means that everything looks great. Now we can continue by importing the modules. So we will say import user and item again from our market.modules. Now we can basically try to create a new user to see if everything has worked properly. So we will say u1 equals to user, and we will specify the username. This will be equal to JSC, for example, and we will write in password underscore hash. This will be equal to just random string of numbers, and we will also say email equals to something like the following. Now if you remember, we also have the fields of budget and the owner. Now I did not specify nullable equals to false on both of those, so that means that it should be enough. Now I guess I missed the email here, so we should fix that to underscore address, and now we are fine. Now let's clean the screen a bit. We will say os.system and we will execute this CLS inside here, and now I can basically go with db.session.add, and we will add the u1 in here, and we can commit our changes by saying db.session.commit. Okay, so now this should be enough for our user to be stored inside our database. Now to see this, we can basically execute user.query.all, and then you can see that we have one user with the user1 statement right here. So it means that everything worked great. Okay, so I cleaned the screen a little bit here. So I also want to test up the relationship if it works great. So we can basically create several items quickly and set their owners to the user that we have just created and see if everything works well. So I will go ahead and say I1 equals to an item, and I will go by saying the name equals to iPhone 10, for example, and we will type in description, and we will just write in a short description here, and we will say barcode equals to a string like that, and we will type in price equals to 800, for example. So I just messed up the desk. We should create the description like that. Okay, so everything works great. And I will go by saying db.session.add, and I will add I1, and I will now use commit. So we will commit our changes. Now let's repeat ourselves with another item. So I will clean the screen here quickly. And I can load the previous comments by using the arrow signs. So I can basically change this to I2 and this to laptop, and I will change the description to description 2, and the barcode here will be a little bit different, and the price will be 1000 that time. And we can repeat ourselves again by saying db.session.add and .commit, like that. Okay, so now we have two items stored inside our database, so we can verify this by saying query.all. And now let's try to assign an ownership to the iPhone 10 item. So we have to go and filter this specific iPhone 10 object, and we can do that by saying item.query.filter_by, and I can filter by name equals to iPhone 10, like that. Okay, so it also makes sense to assign this into a new variable, so I will go ahead and with item 1 I will assign it. And now if I access item 1, then you can see that it returns us a base query, and now we can basically use this first method to grab the specific object itself. So now I have the item 1 object in here, and now I want to test up the results if I try to access the attribute of owner. And now you can see that it returns us nothing because it doesn't have an owner. Now to continue from here, I can basically say that I want to assign the owner of item 1 to the specific object of the user that we have just created previously with the username of JSC. So it will look like something like the following. So it will be item1.owner, and this will be equal to user.query.filter_by. And I want to filter by the username equals to JSC. And if you remember, this entire statement here returns us a base object, and we have to access the actual object by saying .first. And as I have done that, then I can continue on to db.session.commit, and I can assign the item 1. And now, sorry, I should have typed in here add. Great, and then I should have continue to commit. Now, as I have done that, then we can see several errors over here. Now I can see that we have this update item set owner where item.id equals to a question mark. Now I have a feeling that I know why this happened, and it's sometimes that always may confuse every one of us. And the point is, we have to understand that the only way that we can assign the attribute of owner is by specifying the ID of the user. So if you remember, our foreign key is only going to accept the attribute of ID. So this is why we have done a great job by filtering the specific user, but only we had to give it the attribute of ID. So let's go ahead and fix that. So before everything, let's clean the screen for a minute. So it will be cls inside os.system. And before I actually take different changes inside our item 1, we have to execute this command, which is going to look like db.session.rollback. So we can roll back our previous changes and commits. And once I execute that, if I did not receive any errors, then it should be fine. And now I will just type in the exact same command that we wrote previously. So it will be item1.owner, and it will be user.query.filter_by, and we will filter by JSC. And after the .first in here, we have to give it the attribute of ID. And once I have done that, then I can basically add it to our session, which is clean because we have rolled back the previous commits. And now we can try to execute the commit, and this should work. So if I was to go ahead and see the owner, then you can see that it returns us 1. And the reason it returns us 1, it is basically because this is the foreign key of the owned user. Now we can also test this by filtering the item specifically. So we can go with I equals to item.query.filter_by, and we want to filter by name equals to iPhone 10, like that. And now we can basically try to see the back reference of the item that I talked about. So if you remember, we had that backref attribute set up. So if I was to go ahead and execute i.ownedUser, then we would receive some errors because again I missed the .first in here. And now I can run in owned user. then you can see that it returns us the actual user that owns this item. So this is quite great, and this is a great achievement that we have done until now. So I hope you understood everything about how relationships of databases working, because it is quite important to be aware of that situation. So this is the actual idea of our website, right? We want to own items as users inside our web application. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know we covered a lot about relationships, SQL alchemy, and everything that is pretty much the complex stuff behind the scenes. But I think this is what really fun with Flask. It looks complex at first, and then once you get it, things look very clean and easy. So I hope you will have some good feedback on this video, and if you have any questions, please consider commenting them out and I will respond. And if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel for being aware for my future uploads. I will see you in my next episode.